The latest. Thank you for your love and support. I appreciate you all. Are all in all, the savior, the protector, the unifier, the messiah, the king of kings, the savior, the most loved. Captain Ibrahim Traore. Powerful speech at UN General Assembly. You see, there's one particular thing that these people are imposing on Africans, and a lot of African countries, the leaders are so scared to talk about it, and that is the trumu thing, no, man and woman thing. No. A lot of African countries, even though they don't like it, but because it is Yellow Popo who is imposing it on us, they have to accept it. They are always quiet. Some are even scared to talk about it because they know if they do pay sanction. Yet these people cannot go to the Arab nations and impose this trumu thing on them. Man and woman thing. But Africa, anything at all, we should accept it. But our all in all, you know that wherever he is, we are always proud to be in the black skin. Captain Ibrahim Traore said it boldly. Yes, no fear. So, according to him, these people should mind their business and leave Africa alone. That we are a people of our own, we have our own culture, our own traditions. And when it comes to trumu, if you are not from Ghana, I told you, woman, man, yes. If it comes to that thing, we forbid it. We can never accept this thing. Yes, so the African countries, the rest of you, the other democratic elected, that you can't say anything and you are signing bills and you are accepting it. Captain Ibrahim Traore said that we are people of our own. The black person can never accept trumu. It is not possible. We can't accept that. We can't eat that. It can never be accepted on the soil of Africa. We taboo it. So these people should mind their business and leave us alone. That they should stop forcing us to accept things that are against our culture. We don't go there to tell them they should accept this other things of Africa. You know, we also have our traditions that we don't force these people to accept. But these people come and be telling us, do this. If you don't do this, we'll do that. If you don't do that thing must come to an end. But these people are saying that polygamy cannot be accepted there. So why is it that they are forcing us to accept trumu? And now they are even telling us, even if you're a human being, you decide to be an animal, we should allow you. That these things are not part of the African society. So they should mind their business and give us space and stop imposing things that are of theirs on us. As for that one, they have to keep quiet. And he also went ahead to tell them that sometimes these people don't want to see African rise. That the heroes that rose up, like Gaddafi, Nkrumah, Nelson Mandela, Sankara, Lumumba, and the rest, that these people decided to silence them. That the only crime they did was to stand up and fight the injustice, fight for freedom. Then these people will say, boom. And UN is always quiet about it. That UN is sleeping, yes. That it is paralyzed, so they have to wake up and stand up. So whatsoever reason to which that they decided to create this organization, that they have to do it because they are not doing their work. It's like UN is always sidelining one aspect. This, when it comes to Yellow Popo, everything of theirs must go through. But when it comes to Africans, that's why they are telling us that even in the UN Security Council, we can only have 2 permanent seats. But when it comes to the veto power, they cannot give it to us. Because when they do that it will make the council dysfunctional. What?
First of all, and I quote, "We are living in an upside-down world. Bodies litter the beaches where billionaires bask." Secondly, and I quote, "We are at a crossroads. We have a common cause, that is leaving to our children a world with a better social environment." End quote. For the third person, despite difficulties, we can emerge from this. What we lack is not ability, but political will. Otherwise, we'd be able to provide progress and peace for all, end quote. And for the fourth personage I'm citing, quote, "There's a dissonance between rhetoric and practice, the facts. The UN Security Council is paralyzed. The UN must shoulder its responsibilities in a world of solidarity and justice as laid out in the UN Charter, and this requires it to have the courage to fight inequality." End quote. The quintessence of these statements by these 4 august personages clearly shows that inequality throughout the world is deliberate. Otherwise, with a modicum of courage and political will, we would be able, if not to eradicate them, at least to minimize them. Indeed, every year we hear so many speeches as well as promises and commitments But the proof of dissonance between rhetoric and facts on these issues relating to principles in the UN Charter, including justice, equality, dignity, integrity, self-determination, the sovereignty of states, the inviolability of territory, and respect for international law, the proof of this dissonance lies in what's happening in Libya, in the Sahel, especially in Niger, and the crisis between Russia and Ukraine. First of all, in Libya, after the catastrophic flooding, thousands of people lost their lives. To assuage our consciences, every nation rushed to provide their condolences and solidarity. This was, of course, to give the impression that we're living in a society and that we defend these values. Intellectual honesty requires, and the history of our conscience tells us, that we ought to sincerely apologize to the people, the Libyan people, for collectively and individually being complicit, whether through passiveness or active complicity, for supporting those butchers who caused the first man-made disaster in Libya. It was this disaster that brought Libya to its knees by looting it and by killing its guide before the flooding plunged it into further sorrow. And unfortunately, this human disaster was led by the UN under Resolution 1970, as well as the guilty silence and the complicity of ECOWAS and the African Union. This macabre intervention, with Nicolas Sarkozy's France spearheading the effort, killed the Libyan guide Colonel Muammar Gaddafi on October 20, 2011. If our condolences to the Libyan people had the slightest bit of common sense and were not hypocritical, then this murderous diplomacy would never have taken place. And now Niger is en route to becoming a second Libya. Next, international relations are tainted by great diplomatic diplomacy with no conscience or morals, dignity or integrity, justice nor peace. And this is proven because there is a clear hunger for devouring prey. Today, we unfortunately must see that, contrary to the good faith statements made at this UN podium, which call for respect for the UN Charter and international law, leaders representing the people of Niger, this brotherly people, were essentially forbidden from accessing the UN headquarters. Burkina Faso strongly condemns this underhanded maneuver, which seems to belong to the practices of the past. And this can only be explained by a loss of essential values needed for any harmonious life in society. The UN should never be used as an instrument in the hands of any country. Pan-Africanist leaders who fought for African unity, our grandparents who fell in dignity, shot by the colonialists, these great sons of Africa who sacrificed themselves for the honor of their continent, who fought fiercely against the slave trade and neocolonialism. All of them have had their eternal rest disturbed when they heard that a handful of exiles, African exiles, are holding Niger hostage. Yes, dear African continent, just a handful of your children have decided to humiliate you through the shameless lies of a state, starting with Niger. And therefore, I issue a sincere and solemn appeal to the people of Senegal, Benin, Niger, Ghana, Chad, Cote d'Ivoire, Guinea-Bissau, and all the people of Africa to stand up in fraternity and solidarity in Africa in order to prevent the imperialists from setting fire to Niger as they did in Libya. President, Secretary General, distinguished participants, at this podium in the UN and before the entire world, I insist that ECOWAS, the African Union, and the UN must become true organizations of peoples instead of structures used by a minority of heads of state. They cannot be used and instrumentalized to destabilize brotherly countries by killing their leaders. This is the only way the UN Charter and international law could have any meaning. And lastly, speaking of the UN Charter and international law, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine is underway and is even desired by certain powers. And several Western countries, especially the US and the European Union, have provided all forms of military support to this conflict. The Ukrainian civilian population are used as volunteers, and some of them are piloting tanks. They're traded as patriots in this war. Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are dealing with a war that was imposed upon them by imperialism under the pretext of terrorists. And these are sowing terror and destruction, despite the UN Charter with its principles of equality, justice on one hand, and on the other hand, international law, which has been often cited here at the UN. There is a massive chasm in the treatment of these different issues. For example, take Burkina Faso. Civilian populations are dealing with lethal incursions, monstrous attacks by terrorists, and they've decided to mobilize alongside the defense and security forces. These populations have been trained by the FDS, and they are called volunteers for the defense of the homeland. In Burkina Faso, we have 58,000 such volunteers, of which 42,000 are communal volunteers and 16,000 are national volunteers, and they are fighting alongside the defense and security forces, the FDS, and they were trained and are guided by them. They only act under the orders and the oversight of the FDS in accordance with regulations to protect their lives and their property. These are the patriots that certain heads of state of ECOWAS and the African Union, exploited by capitalist imperialist forces, are trying to describe to the international community as militias, and that is the shameless state-sponsored lie. Mr. President, if the international community were honest and sincere in its commitment to fight terrorism, it would have no problem with civilian populations training themselves to defend themselves. There is a clear lack of honesty in the international community. Here are a few examples. First of all, when Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and other countries organized along their common borders by pooling their forces to combat terrorism, France came out of nowhere to impose its instrument, that is G5 Sahel. Today, ECOWAS suddenly has established an intervention force to reestablish democracies. It announced a contribution of $2 billion. But from the creation of this G5 Sahel until its dissolution, ECOWAS was only able to allocate $25 million. So, can they be really said to take seriously the defense of human lives as laid out in the Declaration of Human Rights and Peoples? Secondly, Burkina Faso is experiencing cynical sanctions after the coup d'etat of September 30th, 2022. This so-called international community, led by France, which just uses its lackeys in Africa, tried to nominate a prime minister of Burkina Faso, but in vain. Then they tried to impose various ministers and strategic posts within the government of my country, again in vain. And lastly, they negotiated the continuing relations so that Captain Ibrahim Traore would implement their will. This was their prerequisite for his being in power. But he refused this in the name of the higher interest of his people, and as a result, an avalanche of repressive measures, threats, and attempted coups d'etats was unleashed upon him. These are immoral maneuvers concocted in criminal laboratories, and unfortunately, all of these macabre maneuvers were led by puppet leaders of African countries. And that's the case for this famous Accra initiative. Even that was not able to last for long. Thirdly, in addition to cutting off aid and other problems with our FDS, we are seeing a blockade on material equipment for us, again led by France. For example, for the important air defense equipment needed to control and defend our territory, we had a contract with Brazil, and the weapons license was supposed to come from Belgium, and the navigation and firing system, as well as the video cameras, were supposed to come from the U.S., and motor was supposed to come, and engine was supposed to come from Canada. but this equipment was all cynically blocked. You talk about defending human rights at the UN, so therefore I ask you to deliver to us our weapons that we need to defend and protect our peoples who are being killed. In any case, I am solemnly informing you of this. If nothing is done, history will hold you responsible for failing to assist people in danger. Distinguished Secretary General and President of the General Assembly, members of the international community. The international community has failed to assist states attacked by terrorism. There's been international hypocrisy, and certain powers dominate the UN. They are complicit in pillaging Africa. Shouldn't this international community be brought before the International Criminal Court for all of this? Our security must be assured by us ourselves, first and foremost, not by anyone else. When it comes to the Wagner presence in Burkina Faso, which has been covered by a puppet press controlled by France, I would respond that it's our brave FDS that is defending our homeland.
Consequently, from this high tribune of the United Nations that magnifies the sacrifice of my country on behalf of national interest, I here applaud the memory of all those who fell due to weapons, magnifying the courage and integrity of those who are still alive, inexorably sacrificing for victory for our people and safeguarding our country. Rather than stopping the human bloodshed, it's fallacious accusations that have occurred and lies wrapped in hypocritical diplomacy and veiled threats to indicate to our partners that they need how we need to behave ourselves, and we say no. On behalf of the United Nations Charter itself and international law that you raise to defend yourselves, and here in this tribune, the African peoples and those of the Sahel, and specifically, are resolutely committed to fully assuming their full emancipation for true social progress. And thus, Burkina Faso will work with its partners that it wants to work with in a sovereign manner and buy from who it wants and defend how it wants. The fact that a country called Russia, Iran, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Cuba, Nicaragua, North Korea, or Burkina Faso can buy and sell their goods freely without any intermediary, without any authorization from anyone, no matter what happens. Mr. President and Secretary General, let's talk about hypocrisy. And let's talk about state lies in this issue of fighting terrorism, generally speaking, and in the Sahel specifically. Perhaps you don't ignore what I'm about to say, but let me lay out my arguments. First, in the Sahel, we have some 10,000 soldiers, armed soldiers, that are foreign soldiers. Most of them are French soldiers, but there are also American soldiers, Germans, Italian, etc. They have weapons. They have flying equipment, they have surveillance equipment, which is the most sophisticated in the world, and yet they don't see the hundreds of terrorists that are moving around in order to serve death and desolation, often with unimaginable weapons at their side. In Mali, in Niger, in Burkina Faso, there is no factory to manufacture weapons nor munitions. So, who is recruiting these terrorists? Who is training them? Who is providing them with weapons? Who feeds them, and with what means? Do you believe in this philanthropy on behalf of whom the Westerners have sent their armies to the Sahel to die for our beautiful blue eyes? Well, if you believe that, then what justifies the diplomatic irritation and other gesticulation of France when we told them to skedaddle with their armies? The real reason is really about the resources that are underground in the Sahel. Indeed, the National French Assembly voted and enacted Law 057 of 10 January of 1957, which then appeared in the official journal of the French Republic of January 1957, which led to the creation of the Common Organization of the Saharan Region, the OCRS, which brought together the parties of Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, Mauritania, Algeria, etc. This zone is unparalleled in the world in terms of wealth underground. For example, the water table, the most significant water table in the world, goes from Mauritania to Somalia and goes through Mali, Algeria, Libya, Niger, etc. The newspaper Le Monde in July 1957 put forth the figure of 6 to 7 million tons of oil found below our soil, potentially in the Sahara, in addition to the natural resources that we also have, such as uranium, gold, cobalt, zinc, diamonds, lithium, copper, etc. You, the Westerners, you so much love the Sahel people, so much that you bring your military and your armies to die in the name of democracy, in the name of freedom and human rights and peace. Then why is it that an African continent with some 1.3 billion people, and the second largest continent of the world in terms of people, with a number that the interpreter cannot figure out of the number of square kilometers, and 54 states, has no permanent seat within the Security Council? Such a huge continent with so many people and no right of veto. How do you justify that? Does that not go beyond a state crime? Is it not beyond a crime of the UN that that is happening? So let's stop with the diplomatic lying, the gross lies, which basically involves imperialist powers coming to the Sahel to defend quote-unquote democracy and human rights. And let's talk about human rights for a minute. Let's remind ourselves here of the first charter in the world on the issue of human rights was the Kurokan Fuga in Mali in 1236. That was the first document that addressed that. And let's go to the second issue, which is Africa does not like to compare deaths. That would be ill-mannered on our part to do so. So I will respectfully bow to the memory of all nationalities of people who lost their lives in Africa and in the Sahel specifically. But if we look at the hazards that are involved, and we look at the unfortunate and condescending attitude of the President of the French Republic, Emmanuel Macron, often who verges on the ridiculous while glorifying a hypothetical condescension vis-a-vis African people. And I have to impose on myself here the duty of giving him a little lesson on history, on his own history, because this is why your classrooms are full of children that are learning their lessons well and growing up. In other words, turn to this story at the risk of losing the real story forever. But let me clarify here that no African people is opposed to the French people. There's no anti-French sentiment in Africa, nor is there any issue with our legendary hospitality and our love of our neighbors. Rather, the African people refuse the condescendence, the arrogance, the insolence, the sufficiency, the paternal attitude, the looting of our resources, and organized crime. That's our problem. Indeed, for your memory, Mr. Emmanuel Macron, first, let me remind you here that through the BBC in England on the 14th of June, 1940, an appeal was launched by your own grandfather, General de Gaulle, to Africa to come and save France from the grip of the Nazis. Let me remind you, 17,000 Malians died during the two world wars. This is a blood debt that France has hidden. And if we look at the book of Bakary Kamian, the professor of the University of Sorbonne in France, says, and in that same document, in page 345, there's a table that looks at the war and the loss of lives in the two wars. People from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, over 82,000 fallen soldiers from those countries in those wars, and over 154,000 soldiers. And this is from a French source, a book by Henri Léger, Report on the End of the AOF Mission, from 1950. It was published. And this is in the archives of Senegal. Please see Annex 5. Now, moving on to the next argument. The 17th November 1986, François Mitterrand, the French president at the time, in response to Captain Sankara said, and I quote, "Africa was looted, and here I'm talking about raw materials. I should have talked about people. For centuries, we exploited you at a human level. We stole your men, your women, your children. We used you. I understand your refusal. I understand your revolt, and I approve of your fight. You are right to refuse to be a sacrifice continent. The time has come for you to develop your own economies based on your own goods and people. And the duty of these countries who abusively used you and used African labor, their duty is to restore to Africa what was taken from them over the last few centuries." End of quote. Indeed, Africa was always openly looted and pillaged, but still there is a great deal of wealth in our continent, of people and mineral resources. By way of proof, let's talk about mineral resources. Africa has 30% of the worldwide mineral reserves, 40% of gold reserves, 33% of diamond reserve, 80% of coltan reserve used for telephones, 60% of cobalt reserves for batteries, 55% of uranium reserves. So it's for the defense of this Africa that the young people of Africa stand more than ever. Mr. Macron, do you still need a little bit of history in order to remember? Finally, before the regrettable exit and the unfortunate exit of Emmanuel Macron, the French president, he was attacked by so many other politicians and compatriots who live in the African bosom. But let me remind you here, despite that, Germans have some 83 million inhabitants with a land surface of 340,000 square kilometers, compared to Congo with 95 million inhabitants and over 2,345,000 square kilometers. Belgium has 11 million inhabitants and over 30,000 square kilometers, compared to Gabon with 2.5 million inhabitants and 267,000 square kilometers. France now has 68 million inhabitants and over 672,000 square kilometers, compared to Namibia with 2.5 million inhabitants and 825,000 square kilometers. So all of this clearly shows, and I quote, "Peace to his soul. Africa is the only continent in the world where the people sing and dance and applaud those who impoverish them, who starve them, and who torture them. The misfortune of Africa is to have met France," end of quote. It's true that the West was violent with Africa, raped it, and stole from Africa. So what is our share of the responsibility in all of this as African leaders? Is it not us, the African leaders, who have abandoned our identity? Our names have disappeared in order to make way for other names that do not match our realities. We need to reconquer our own culture and take ownership. And that's why today people try to make us believe that our values and our attitudes are not natural and are not part of freedom, and that there will never be a question of homosexuality for us. Let me repeat that. Homosexuality will not take root in our countries. Mr. President, now what's just been described are very unfortunate labels used by the UN that can be summed up as follows. 1.2 million people who are in the depths of poverty, $2.2 billion of the United States money invested in weapons, 20 times the budget of the United Nations invested in the nuclear, and all of these should be compared to issues of development. Africa gets from the IMF and the World Bank $34 billion, vis-a-vis $160 billion invested in the West. The paralysis of the Security Council, the paralysis of the World Trade Organization, increasing tensions due to geostrategic repositioning. The World Health Organization, which is increasingly dominated by Western pharmaceutical companies, and trade interests. We see this, for example, with the priority attached in terms of trade to vaccines against COVID-19. The United Nations is more and more in the shadows of its own attempts of being taken hostage by a conglomerate of international powers.
We can never accept this thing. Yes, so the African countries, the rest of you, the other democratic elected, that you can't say anything and you are signing deals and you are accepting it. Captain Ibrahim Traore is saying that we are people of our own. The black person can never accept trumu. It is not possible. We can't accept that. We can't eat that. It can never be accepted on the soil of Africa. We taboo it. So these people should mind their business and leave us alone. That they should stop forcing us to accept things that are against our culture. We don't go there to tell them they should accept this other things of Africa. You know, we also have our traditions that we don't force these people to accept. But these people come and be telling us, do this. If you don't do this, we'll do that. If you don't do that thing must come to an end. How? You see, it's only Captain Ibrahim Traore, Asimi Abdurrahman. They can stand up and talk to these people. There's a country called G. Nobody want to take that. When it comes to that trumu, oh, everybody is running away. Like, you can't have African leaders to be bold to tell these people that it cannot happen in Africa. And some are saying that it is the duty of the teachers to make sure that they inculcate whatever. But the teachers, how many hours do these children spend with the teachers? The thing is in the curriculum. Just say we are doing away with this thing in that curriculum. It cannot be done in Africa. It can be done in this country. But if you are saying teachers should rather make sure that they teach the children the right thing, when they are on their phone, we are not with them. After class, during break, teachers are not with them. So be bold to say we will not accept it. Like we had the president who passed on, Fifi Male said that it is not possible. It can never happen here. That is what's supposed to be. Like Captain Ibrahim Traore is telling them to their face. That thing, we hate it. Africans, we can never allow ourselves to see ourselves in that. And others are saying that their people have right. Which right? If they're having right, don't we have left? What about we those who have the majority left and we are saying we don't want it? What about that? Some will say they have to take it to court. There are some people who are protesting. Yet when it comes to us asking them to accept polygamy, they don't say they have people who have left and right. Because there are some Yolo Popo who also wish that they will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wives. But the law says only one. And they are forced to stay by that. So if we to our culture says that trumu is not acceptable, it's not acceptable. There's no government that should come and be trying to massage this issue. It is no. Period. They don't say these people, Arabs should do that. Africa, because we don't always stand up to these people and be bold to them. That's why everything they will try and say, if you don't accept it, we'll put sanction. That's what Captain Ibrahim Traore is telling them. That they have to do away with that kind of discrimination. We also have the right to decide what is good for us. Not that we are kids. That even if they help us to cross the road, it doesn't mean that they are always there with us to be holding our hands. That we can do anything of ours on our own. And it's because we are not self-sufficient. That's why Captain Ibrahim Traore is telling you, the African leaders, those of you who always portray yourselves as the poorest people, yet you are the richest. How can you have gold and be giving gold out for paper, pen and ink, and you know that thing? No, that is why these people are not always regarding us. And when it comes to us, they always want to brush us out as if everything of ours doesn't matter. But look at our population. So until you stand up to these people like Captain Ibrahim Traore, Asimi Goita, Dramani Chani are doing, we will never make a headway. You only go and sit in that their summit that they created for you and the sponsor, you go and be giving us speeches, and Africa will never make any headway. And wherever we go, these people don't regard us. Even in Africa, you allow these yellow people to come to Africa and still be treating us anyhow on our own continent. Like it's not bad, no, it's not supposed to be so long. So these are leaders. Now you understand why we love Mali, Niger, and Burkina. The things you can do, that's what they are doing. And you see them be telling that they have to come back to constitution. What is constitutional rule? The people have decided that these leaders should be their presidents for 5 years. They have voted. Yet because we do not follow the model of the white person, you are saying that it's constitutional rule. The people have spoken. Democracy is of the people for the people. That's what you said. But even the places that we queue and vote, at the end of the day, sometimes the presidents that we want, we don't even get them. You see, Yellow people will always have to find a way to get us leaders that will come and then they will be doing their bid. You know, they want people who only come and sing democracy and do nothing, talk, and because if you try to do anything outside of their model, you know what will happen to you. Yes, so you also fear. So for that reason, you just have to be saying yes sir all the time, and we can't continue to be saying yes sir. It is not in the blood of the black person to be saying yes sir. That's why our forefathers rose up and fought oppression that we have to resist it. Yet we always allow ourselves to welcome yellow people to come into the continent and be oppressing us. If they say tariff, you tariff them. After all, their industries needs African resources. You have something that these people want from you. So if they are not giving you something, use that. But you still sit here and they'll come and carry the natural resources for free. This aid that Trump said he's not going to give to you, your natural resources, he will still come and take it for free. After all, the aid is not for free. It is for the mineral resources of Africa. But our leaders are always one is giving broad daylight and the other one is taking in the dark. And the one who is taking the darkness is the one taking everything. But the peanuts, they will make noise for the whole world to see that they are helping Africa. They are not helping us. So the aid is never for free. When the old ones will go and sit there and they'll be dozing now, they can't say anything. Sometimes before yellow people will finish speaking through the nose, they are even asleep. They don't even know what this man is saying. All they do is sign. And sometimes when they get there, according to the report, they'll get them these beautiful ladies. You see, when the black man sees color, then they'll just be signing this. That's what people are saying. So our leaders, that's why we say we need these young ones to come and save Africa. All the freedom fighters who fought for the liberation of Africa were never old like these ones. They were energetic. The brain, like you see Nkrumah, you see Gaddafi, you see, like you see, not these ones that will go and be sleeping, and some of them they will even be urinating like a president from one country that is over 90 years. Cameroon, it's your matter where they talk now. That man, you have to let him go. We can't continue to have this man. Africa don't need people like this. We are not in the Stone Age era. We need vibrant, energetic people to come and lead the continent, so that together we'll see the beautiful Africa that we want. Like Captain Ibrahim Traore, Assimi Goita, Abdullah, our all in all, our saviors, our protectors. Yes, when I call them the saviors, people don't understand. You are sitting here holding Bible, yet they are using that same Bible to come and rob your natural resources. They are not. Jesus Christ is not saving us. In the name of Jesus Christ, the mineral resources are living. So we want people that will come and fight for us and put Bible aside and fight. Yes, Captain Ibrahim Traore said we should be ready to fight. It's economic war. This war, if you want freedom, you should be ready to fight. So nobody will give that freedom to us on a silver platter. What we are going to US general meetings to go and do, and then African Union summit, it will not help you. The reparation you are calling for, it will never come, because these people will never give it to you. You have to show them action. You are strong. The African is who is stronger than us on this earth, and yet these people are making us look like we are the weakest people. But Captain Ibrahim Traore is proving to them that when it comes to strength, the African man, they know that's why they have to come for us to go and build their industries and make their countries whatever it is, and they don't want to leave Africa because they still want to get cheap labor from Africa. So they'll come in the name of scholarships and other things. This Captain Ibrahim Traore said is another form of slavery. You know, this man is just exposed. That's why they are doing everything possible to take him. 19 attempts and they all fail. This is beautiful. This is amazing and so wonderful. United we stand, divided we fall, and united we keep standing forever and ever. The greatest enemy of the African is mental slavery. So let's decolonize ourselves from mental slavery. Let's keep sharing to educate our brothers and sisters. Together we make Africa great for ourselves and the next generations that are going to come. So that's the latest around the world, in Africa, West Africa, and in Burkina Faso.